Let's turn to our liturgy and begin to wind down our study. Let's just read 3 verses out of the book of Genesis, 2 verses out of the book of Romans, and that'll do it for our study tonight. I'm not going to watch the video. I'll skip the video since we've run out of time. And so after the liturgy, we'll simply just close in prayer. Genesis 2, verse 1. These are Sabbath passages. We talked about Sabbath last week. We're continuing on that discussion. In chapter 2 here, Moses writes in verse 1 of chapter 2, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them." Verse 2, "And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done." Verse 3, "So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation." Sabbath verses, to be sure, even though the word Sabbath doesn't show up in these verses. He uses the description of seventh day. But make no mistake, in other passages, like say in Exodus, he overlaps the word seventh with the word Sabbath, so that we have no mistake that the Sabbath is the seventh day, and the seventh day is the Sabbath day. The Hebrew on the right side of the screen of verse 1 says, "Vayhulu hashamim v'ha'aretz vaychol tzva'am." Verse 2 says, "Vaychol Elohim bayom hashvi'i melakto asher asa vaish bot bayom." Well, he does say, it's words similar to the Sabbath there when he said he rested, vaish bot bayom hashvi'i, and he rested on the seventh day. And it says in Hebrew, mikol milakto asher asa. So we have a word similar to our word for Sabbath. It's not the exact same word. It's a verbal form instead of the noun form. The word rested right here in the English, the verbal form shows up over here. In the Hebrew, vaish bot, this verb right there, he rested on the seventh day. He rested on the seventh day. He Shabbated, if you want to get really ultra literal. Verse 3 says, "Vayivarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i, vayikadesh oto kivo Shabbat." Again, we have Shabbat. He rested. Ki vo Shabbat, which Shabbat again, this Hebrew word right there, even though it's a verb, it's where we get the noun Shabbat. You can even hear it, Shabbat, right? One's a V, one's a B sound. Ki vo Shabbat mikol milakto asher bara Elohim la'asot. So just some interesting nuggets for us to consider as we're reading through our Bible. Let's turn to Romans 14 and read verses 5 and 6. These are the verses that many Christians have been taught is a discussion on Sabbath versus Sunday. I disagree with that interpretation. I don't think Paul's pitting Sabbath versus Sunday. I think in context he's pitting fast days versus fast days versus non-fast days, which days you fast on, which days you set aside as a special day to fast on, which days others don't recognize. In English, he says in Romans 14 verse 5, "One person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike. Each one could be fully convinced in his own mind." I think what Paul is saying in plain language is one person esteems a fast day and sets that aside for God as a fast day, and it's better than those other days because it's a day spent fasting and recognizing God's presence. Others esteem all days as alike, meaning it's okay to eat. There's no special quality to that day. I don't have to fast to God. I have my own different fast days. So we have differences of opinion when it comes to which days I'm going to fast on, which days I'm going to set aside to God and worship God during that fast day. The point is that each one should be fully convinced about his own fast day in his own mind. I think that's the best way to understand the passage. He continues in verse 6, "The one who observes that fast day observes it in honor of the Lord," meaning he doesn't eat. The one who does eat, by contrast, I think that's the context, the one who does eat eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the one who abstains from eating, meaning it's a fast day, abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. So notice right away, even in the language, that he's talking about eating and abstaining, and I think this is proof that it is fast versus non-fast days. The Greek, let's read that on the right side of the page. Verse 5, "Hos min gar krine himeron par himeron, hos dekrine pasan himeron hekastos into idio noi plerophoresto." verse 6. And verse 6 contains what many recognize is a bracketed variant, so that if you have a King James Version of your Bible, which draws from a different manuscript family, then that manuscript was a longer reading, which included some extra words. But if you're reading from a more modern Bible, like a ESV or an NASB or something else, you're going to have a shorter reading in your Bible. It's going to leave out some of those extra words because the manuscript family that it pulls from is shorter in the Greek. Which one's the original that Paul wrote? Hard to say for certain, right? There seems to be a lot of weight on either side as to which one is the original. But nevertheless, we can see this in Greek Bibles that show the variants, and it is right there. Is that important for our discussion, for our liturgy? No, not really. I'm just bringing it up for your FYI, for your trivia. So let's read verse 6 in the Greek. It says, Ha phronon tein hemeron kurio phrane. And then pause, insert the bracket for the longer reading for those KJV folks. Kai ha me phronon tein hemeron kurio u phrane. End of bracket, end of variant. Resume now the shorter reading for those of you who are reading ESV, NASB, and things like that. Ha estion kurio estie euchariste, gar to theo kai ha me estion kurio uk estie kai euchariste to theo. And that'll do it for our liturgy for tonight.